All right, guys. Carp Cutlass. Just got back from vacation. Was gone almost a week. Went down south. Had a little fun. You know, not too much. Things are still kind of screwed because of COVID, and we snuck back in right before things got even screwier. So we ended up going to the Mooresville Mayhem, which I brought back a flyer. Awesome event for anybody that is into vintage racing, and this is vintage racing, not a vintage event. These guys are highly competitive. Just an awesome show. If you guys are in that area, you know, North Carolina, South Carolina, Southern Indiana, Kentucky, highly suggest you guys go check those guys out. Awesome group of guys to watch race. They run A-Gas, B-Gas, C-Gas class. They got a couple exhibition guys, and they do run super stocks, vintage super stocks. So, and I did post up a video of that from, you know, whatever I got while we were out there. So the other thing is, I wanted to talk about is another YouTuber out there posted up a thing about timing, right? And the power secrets. Well, there's power to be made in timing, but a couple of things that people have to realize is that when you mess with your timing, there's a spark curve, and your carburetor has its own fuel curve that works through its circuits. So I kind of want to focus on the timing end, and then we'll talk about fuel a little bit, and I hope I explain this the best that I can, best I understand it. So I got a couple things going on here in this handy dandy box. I got BTDC, which is before Top Dead Center, and the next event that happens would be TDC, Top Dead Center, which is at the upmost part of the cylinder's upstroke, and then you got ATDC, which is after Top Dead Center, commonly known as retarded timing, that is on the downstroke. That doesn't make for a good thing for the most part. So, and then I did a little reference here on the intake exhaust. So let's focus on BTDC. Now when this happens is, now when you set up your timing on most cars, most stock applications, you are talking about what's going to work from the factory. Usually on GM cars, you're talking about like 8 degrees before Top Dead Center, and most cars will benefit from bumping it up to like 12. But besides that, how fast that curve comes in really helps the car depending on how the fuel mixture is. And again, that is to reference what I'm saying, fuel curve, spark curve. So what's going on here is as the cylinder is going up, the valves have shut all the way as it's going up to store cylinder pressure. So when you're talking about cylinder pressure, that is stored energy, heat. And what's going on is it's on the way up, it's compressing that fuel mixture, so your intake cycle, and then it's going up, and it's compressing that fuel mixture up, and then it ignites before it gets all the way to the top to store that extra energy, so that when it comes down with a more better combustion, more power. So let me touch on that. So people who talk about like locked timing, when you do that, you're running your total timing constantly all the time. So if you're running 36 total, your distributor is going to see, your engine's going to see 36 degrees of total timing the entire time. There's pros and cons to this. On cars that have a lot of overlap, what it tends to do is it really cleans up the idle, as cars with a lot of overlap tend to be fat at idle at the lower RPM, as it's not seeing complete thorough, it's not seeing thorough combustion of the fuel and air mixture. And an MSD helps with that. I have been reluctant to add an MSD to my setup. I am still running a conventional stock style HEI with no ignition aids. And so what happens is, you have your spark curve, right? So let's draw this up, and let me. Where the hell is my marker? Again, I am ill prepared for this. My wife just told me. All right, so let's say your car idles at like 700, right? And your timing shouldn't be moving here. And let's say you got 14 degrees, which is what I run, of initial. This is static. Your initial is static. That is how much ignition timing you have with the mechanical advance not moving at all. So, moving the distributor, that's your initial. It shouldn't bounce around at idle. If it does, your advance is way too light, but I'll touch on that later. So let's say you got 700 at idle, and then you're going to accelerate, and you should have a graph like this, right? And most cars will benefit having the total timing and average here at about 3,000. Mine comes in a lot sooner and a lot faster. So my idle, for explanation purposes, we're going to change this. My idle likes to be at around 800 to 850. As soon as I snap it up to 950, we're already coming up very aggressively. By the time we're at like 1800, we're almost all in. So most of my timing is already in by about 2,000 RPM. And the reason for that is I have a 3500 stall converter. I have some slip. The car doesn't really see that much of a load at lower RPM. But since I did not want to lock out the timing for easier starting, what I did was I created a really sharp advance off idle that would actually look sharper than this. It would almost go like vertical to its point. So I have 14 initial. My distributor has, or 14 initial, yeah. My distributor has 22 mechanical, and it all comes in about in the low 2000s. It starts to come in most of my timing around 1800, and it closes up fast. And I don't know this for a fact, but when you buy a curve kit, it explains to you the graphs. You know, you'll have like one for your gold, one for your silver, and one for your dark one, or light, medium, and heavy. And what happens is, you know, most people say most carburetor issues are created by ignition problems. So when you buy your out-of-the-box distributor, most distributors come with 2 medium springs. It's a pretty common curve. Most cars will like it. But let's say you got a car that's got a high stall, and you got, I don't know, you got a conventional vacuum secondaries carb where the fuel comes in based off engine demand. That's forgiving. You go to a carburetor like a double pumper, your accelerator pumps become super, super crucial if you're running a fast curve in the timing. And I know I'm kind of getting into fuel, but it does reference and it cross-references for good tuning. So I learned this years ago on my own stuff. And again, I'm explaining you stuff as I've learned it. So let's say you got 14 initial, it comes up fast, right, to 36 because I got 22 mechanical. So that means that I got 14 initial and the mechanical advance adds 22. I do not run a vacuum advance. That's pretty much for fuel economy. So we got 36 total. Now on its way up, what it's going to happen is on its way up, this is going to ignite here and fuel is going to come in and it needs to feed that combustion. Now, if you don't have enough fuel and your spark comes in really soon, you're going to have a really lean burn and you might have a lean spot. What most people call bogs are usually lean spots unless you have a really overly rich carb. So, and keep in mind, most accelerator pump circuits are there to aid that transition from idle to cruise, idle to whatever it is, the cam, the arm lever, the pitch, whatever type of carburetor you have. That design is specifically set up to aid a lean spot between transitionary points of the carburetor's performance, but timing has a lot to do with it. So, story time. The first time I went to a double pumper carb, I had a pretty aggressive timing curve. And most carburetors are kind of set up just a little rich, right? But my timing was coming in really fast. The vacuum secondaries carb was pretty forgiving because it was based off of, you know, the secondaries kick in based off of engine load. So I put the carb on and man, this thing off idle has a horrible bog. Call a friend of mine and he says, what pump cams are on it, blah, blah, blah. Change this and change that. I did. Problem solved. I never changed the timing. I got rid of that distributor, got a distributor for another friend of mine, tossed it in thinking that because he had a race car, it was going to be no problem, right? Nope. Same carburetor, same distributor, with a different timing curve, horrible off the line bog. Pop open the distributor, it's got 2 heavy weights. His car had a 456 gear and a bunch of stalls, so it was never an issue. The car would spin up faster than mine with a set of 390s. And this is where combination comes into play when you're talking timing, fuel and all that magic that happens, right? So what I did was I put my light and my medium spring back on there. Actually, I went to a light with the old engine at that time, and bog was completely gone. It needed a lot more. Needed a lot more initial timing for all of the. It needed a lot more extra timing for the fuel. And again, it's all about, and mind you, I can't explain that scenario completely because I didn't have an AFR gauge at the time, so I was completely guessing whether it was a lean or fat spot. I was kind of playing with it until it ran right. And this is where I tell people, I'm going to write it out for you. Right. Buy an AFR gauge. That looks like a V. Buy an AFR gauge. This tool right here will fill in the blanks. If you're having transition issues with your carburetor, you know that when it's happening and where on the load. Changing the distributor curve is really easy compared to diving in and changing a bunch of jets. And it's simple. Take the current distributor you have, try a different combination of springs, see how that helps. And then from there you can kind of play with your pump cams and your jets and stuff like that. As you get to see, the AFR will fill in the blanks of everything that's happening. You get a bunch of old crotchety bastards that say, I can tune it right by ear and reading the spark plugs. It could be very, very deceiving because, again, cars with a lot of overlap on a camshaft with big cams, they tend to idle fat. And when people tune a carburetor lean for idle because it's naturally burning rich because of the amount of overlap in the cam, what tends to happen is the idle is too lean for the engine to run right, and then you create a bunch of issues. And in that situation, you can slow down the timing if it's too lean to kind of fatten up the mix, because the faster the timing and the sooner the timing coming in, it's gonna store more energy, more heat. So like with an MSD, you lock out the timing, it's already there at idle, your mixture is going to be really lean. So most people that lock out the timing, you have to usually fatten up the idle quite a bit. And so with an AFR gauge, it helped me learn a lot about what kind of happens. Not only that, but watching my TAC and watching the AFR gauge. And I did put a video, I did take a video, I'm going to post it up at the end of this where you can see what it does. I fired it up, it settles in between 12.5 and 13.0, and if you rev it, it goes rich as it should, because you're dumping a ton of fuel to aid a lean condition, and it should, after it goes rich, it should recover. And so after that transition circuit is done, if it's still fat, then you need to adjust the jet. And again, it helps you understand that. But I wanted to explain to people that when you talk to people about timing, it has a lot to do with the fuel curve. And most people, you're talking fuel curves, they're thinking like laptops and shit like that. But when you're talking about fuel curve with a carburetor, you're talking about your circuits and where, based off engine load, those circuits are working and when they're working. And knowing what to tune sometimes can be tricky. I am pretty much still at the novice level. I don't know if I even explained this right, but I have been able to tune carburetors pretty good and get stuff to run right. And it's worked out for me. So hopefully this helps you guys. I'm sure I left a lot of shit out, but again, and one thing I didn't talk about is TDC, right? So at top dead center, the engine has already seen the end of its up cycle. If you fire at TDC, you're losing power because you're not storing any energy. When it fires before the exhaust opens up, like if it happens at TDC, you're not storing anything, the exhaust cycle happens and you lost power. You want to store energy. That's why you fire before top dead center. You want to store that energy before it goes out the exhaust. So, and then retarded timing. Now, I don't know much about this, so I'm not really going to touch into it, but I've been told that once you're up on the higher RPM, you can retard the timing and make more power. The only reason I can think about that is because the engine's already spinning so fast that the need to store that much energy isn't as necessary. So at some point,
you're fighting the timing, I think, with the engine dynamics. And somebody who knows more about that can fill me in about that, because that's like racer stuff, older stuff. I've never played with it. I know people who have, and I don't know if they were successful with it or not. But either way, you know, BTDC is before top dead center. Top dead center is after your stroke is all gone on the upstroke, and then ATDC is on the way down. So when you're talking about retarded timing, you're talking about after TDC, and when you're talking about retarding the timing, you're talking about bringing this line here further up, closer to TDC. And that's where, like, you know, it really it really comes down to what your car likes and what it's going to want. But it's pretty basic. I know I probably did a pretty crude job of explaining it, but again, I think when people talk strictly about timing, they leave a lot of this out, and that's where fuel injection really shines, because, and this is also where I tell people, if you're running an EFI system, I think the truly added benefit of the EFI is having spark control, because the AFR gauge is going to dictate, you know, the spark and the fuel curve for the car to run right at its best, based off of the AFR reading. Whereas with a carburetor and a mechanical style advanced distributor, you're limited to somewhat of a static tune, where you kind of have to get the car to work well all across the board, and the mechanical only has so much adjustment, the carburetor only has some adjustment. My wife is huffing and puffing because there's a fly in here and I'm watching her waft it. But either way, with a carburetor and a distributor, you can still get it to run very good, but the advent of the advance of the EFI, that the main benefit is the fact that when you can control the spark, the EFI is truly going to work as best as it can, because it can tune any flat spots or stuff like that. Like when I did the EFI, I had a decel problem where it bogged on deceleration, and I was able to get rid of most of it by changing the curve in the distributor, but I can only change that curve in the distributor so much, because otherwise it would affect my off-idle performance. So I had to limit myself to what I wanted to really live with. And I could have tuned it with a laptop, and a lot of guys told me that, but I really wanted to get the EFI to work as best as it could with as least laptop work. And I got my EFI set up to run really well without any laptop tuning, which that would have been the next step, but I got rid of it. And hopefully here you guys can understand that when you change your timing, what's going on. When you advance your timing, you're going to make more power sooner if the fuel is there. And you're not really going to make more power sooner. I guess what I should say is you're going to make your power sooner. You're going to start making power sooner, you know, where you're going to move that power band with your timing. Now, on the upper end of things, total timing will affect how much power you do make, but that's once you've hit that curve. The advance in everything dictates where everything falls. So when you guys are dealing with bogs, keep in mind that a simple spark curve change might help your bog, and a simple accelerator pump adjustment will also help your bog, because I see way too many people fiddling with jets before they truly understand what's going on. And really, if it's off idle, then you're talking about a transition circuit. I know the jets do affect that, but to some extent, your main course of action will always be the accelerator pump circuit. So I know I had to intertwine both. This isn't just timing, but I guess for the sake of it, this is kind of fuel and you know, timing spark, and how everything kind of happens. And hopefully you guys can understand that. Last time at the track, I had an air bleed that I think was clogged, and I was seeing some really, really fat numbers on my AFR, and then some lean spikes. So what I did to help that is I fattened up my idle, and I bumped up my idle speed so that more past that transfer slot to dump a little extra fuel. That way there'd be enough fuel in the chamber or in the intake runner to aid any coughs that I could have had. And then after my first run, I made another adjustment, and the car went back to normal, and I think it cleared itself out, because that AFR reading I'm about to show you guys, it was way different when I first got this thing fired up with the AFR gauge. But it seemed to heal itself, and I think it's because something was gunking up the carb, and after one heavy ass pass, we were good. So either way, I'm gonna let you guys go. Hopefully this helps somebody. I explained it the best that I possibly could, so be easy on me, but I know that the relation of spark curve and fuel curve are very important, and if you're gonna look at one, do not neglect the other. They do intertwine quite a bit. So we'll let you guys go. We got things coming up here soon. So share, like, subscribe. If you guys are going to follow me on Facebook, you have to look me up as Copper's Garage, not Copper Cutlass, because Copper Cutlass will take you to my personal page, and I have very limited content that I share with people openly. But if you guys want to follow my projects, I will kind of reboot that page. But you have to follow me as Copper's Garage, and on Instagram I am Copper Cutlass, so there might be the confusion there because I've had a lot of people that started following me on Facebook. So just to clear that up, Copper's Garage on Facebook, that one's important. If you guys want me to continue to do stuff like that, I can do it. I'll let you guys go because it's fucking hot in here. It's Friday. We'll see you.